Welcome back to Swift Tale, the channel where unbelievable real-life stories, shocking twists, and unforgettable lessons are brought to life. But before we dive in, I want to ask you a question. What would you do if you were accused of something you didn't do, humiliated in front of others, and the person who could have proved your innocence wasn't even there to witness it? That is exactly what happened to a hard-working maid in today's story, a woman whose only crime was trying to do her job honestly and with dedication, yet she was suddenly thrust into a nightmare she never saw coming. The Mafia boss's fiancée, a woman used to having her way and bending everyone around her to her will, accused this maid of stealing food, and the consequences were immediate. The maid was fired on the spot, her dignity shattered, and her life thrown into chaos. What no one knew at the time was that the truth was quietly waiting to be revealed, hidden in plain sight by a set of security cameras that captured everything, ready to expose the real culprit. If this is your first time visiting Swift Tale, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because stories like this are more than just entertainment. They show the raw realities of power, prejudice, and justice, and remind us how quickly lives can be affected by false accusations. Today's tale matters because it highlights the importance of truth, patience, and resilience in the face of lies, and it reminds us that no matter how small or powerless someone may seem, the truth always has a way of surfacing. Over the next few minutes, you'll witness a story filled with tension, shock, and ultimate vindication. A story where one woman's innocence is threatened by greed and entitlement, but where justice, in the end, proves stronger than deceit. So get comfortable, pay close attention, and prepare yourself for a story that will make you question how quickly judgments are made and how one act of courage can completely turn a situation upside down, exposing lies, restoring dignity, and leaving a lasting lesson for everyone involved. Lena, the maid at the center of today's story, had never imagined that her life would lead her into one of the most powerful households in the city. Born and raised in a modest neighborhood, she grew up learning the values of hard work, humility, and perseverance from her mother and grandmother, who often reminded her that dignity could not be bought, only earned. She had worked tirelessly to support herself, juggling odd jobs and long hours, always dreaming of a stable position where her efforts would be respected and her integrity acknowledged. When the opportunity arose to work in the mansion of the notorious Mafia boss, she saw it as a chance not only to secure her livelihood, but to prove her worth in an environment that demanded perfection. On her first day, Elena stepped into a world of opulence and silent tension, marble floors gleaming under golden chandeliers, priceless artwork adorning the walls, and an air thick with unspoken rules and hierarchies. She immediately sensed that the household was more than just a luxurious home. It was a carefully orchestrated stage where loyalty, obedience, and appearances were everything, and one misstep could have severe consequences. Elena quickly realized that while the boss himself treated her with a calm respect that was unusual for someone of his reputation, his fiancée and several other family members viewed her very differently. They observed her with a cold, scrutinizing gaze, their words and glances hinting at the disdain they harbored for someone they considered beneath them. Despite this, Elena carried herself. The mansion of the Mafia boss was more than just a home. It was a carefully structured world governed by power, fear, and strict hierarchies, where every member of the family believed they had a place above others. The boss's fiancée, Isabella, was the undisputed queen of this domain whenever her partner was away. Elegant, sharp-tongued, and accustomed to control, she treated everyone around her as if they existed solely to serve her whims, and she quickly identified Elena as a target for her cruelty. Isabella's disdain was clear in every glance, every word, every instruction she gave, as if the maid's mere presence offended her sense of entitlement. Then there were the other family members, each carrying their own sense of superiority. Lucia and Valentina, two of the boss's nieces, were raised to expect deference from everyone. They whispered behind Elena's back, mocked her quietly, and delighted in any opportunity to assert their perceived social dominance. Even Marco, the eldest son, seemed to take a perverse pleasure in undermining her, finding as days passed, the tension in the mansion grew heavier, pressing down on Elena with every task she completed. What had started as subtle coldness and dismissive glances escalated into deliberate acts of cruelty. Isabella, the boss's fiancée, began assigning her impossible chores, demanding perfection within unreasonably short time frames and criticizing every minor imperfection as if it were a personal failing. Lucia and Valentina, emboldened by Isabella's approval, took pleasure in trivializing Elena's efforts, whispering insults behind her back, deliberately misplacing items to frame her, and making her the subject of cruel jokes during family gatherings. Marco, the eldest son, intensified the torment by inventing minor accusations, such as claiming she mishandled items or misread instructions, all while smirking as the family watched. Despite the constant pressure, Elena remained composed, carrying out her duties with quiet diligence and unwavering professionalism. Yet the attacks were not limited to tasks alone. The family began testing her patience in subtle ways, spilling drinks near her feet, deliberately confusing instructions, and commenting sarcastically on her appearance or manners. Even the smallest errors, whether real or imagined, were exaggerated into evidence of incompetence. Each incident chipped away at her confidence, but Elena refused to retaliate or complain, hoping that patience and diligence would eventually earn respect. However, she had no way of knowing that the household's cruelty was building toward a moment of public humiliation so severe that it would leave her vulnerable, humiliated, and completely at the mercy of those who held her future in their hands. This relentless escalation set the stage for a confrontation that would not only reveal the family's true nature, but also test Elena's resilience in ways she never expected. The tension that had been simmering in the mansion finally reached a breaking point on a sweltering afternoon when the family hosted a small gathering of guests. Elena had spent hours preparing, arranging the tables, polishing silverware, and ensuring every dish was perfectly presented. She moved quietly through the rooms, intent on fulfilling her duties without drawing attention, but attention was precisely what Isabella craved. Spotting an opportunity to assert control and humiliate Elena, Isabella seized a tray of food from the kitchen and claimed it had disappeared under the maid's watch. Her voice carried through the hall, sharp and accusatory. "Elena, did you take this?" The guests froze as Elena, startled, insisted she had not touched the tray. But Isabella, smiling with the confidence of someone certain of their power, accused her loudly and with theatrical disdain, twisting the situation to make it appear that Elena had been stealing. The other family members quickly joined in, echoing Isabella's words, nodding as if the accusation was self-evident. Marco suggested that perhaps she shouldn't even be allowed in the kitchen, while Lucia and Valentina whispered cruel remarks about her supposed carelessness. Despite her protests, Elena's words were ignored. The room was filled with judgment and scorn. Within moments, she was summoned to the boss's fiancée's private office, where the final blow came. She was fired. The order was delivered coldly, with no room for explanation or defense, and Elena was left stunned, humiliated, and on the verge of tears. The weight of injustice pressed down on her as she stepped out of the mansion for the first time as an accused criminal in the eyes of the household. At that moment, it seemed as though her loyalty, hard work, and integrity had been completely erased, replaced by a lie so convincing that even she began to doubt whether anyone would believe her when the truth finally came to light. Elena walked away from the mansion that day with a mix of shock, anger, and heartbreak swirling inside her. Her uniform, once a symbol of steady work and reliability, now felt like a shroud of humiliation. With no income and her reputation tarnished by false accusations, she faced the harsh reality of surviving in a world that seemed indifferent to her innocence. Friends and neighbors offered words of comfort, but they could not undo the sting of betrayal or the fear that no one powerful enough would intervene on her behalf. She replayed the events over and over in her mind, analyzing what she could have done differently, but every rational thought reminded her that the accusations were baseless and cruel. The very people who should have recognized her loyalty had instead believed lies, and the weight of that injustice felt unbearable. During the following days, Elena tried to regain some sense of normalcy. She searched for other work, yet her confidence had been shaken. Every interview and inquiry reminded her of the humiliation she had endured. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, Isabella and the other family members carried on as though nothing had happened. The fiancée flaunted her victory, convinced she had permanently silenced a perceived threat, while the rest of the household whispered about the lesson Elena had supposedly learned. But Elena was not one to give up quietly. Though hurt and exhausted, she began to plan carefully, determined to find a way to prove her innocence. Little did she know, the very evidence that could exonerate her, a set of security cameras capturing every corner of the mansion, had already recorded the truth. The stage was being silently set for a revelation that would not only clear her name, but also confront those who had wrongly accused her in the most undeniable way imaginable. Turning point came when the mansion's security footage was finally reviewed, revealing what had really happened in the kitchen that fateful day. Hidden cameras, positioned for safety and oversight, had captured every moment of the incident, every step, every action, every gesture. On the video, it became clear that Elena had done nothing wrong. The missing food had been misplaced by another staff member entirely, someone careless but unnoticed by the fiancé's sharp eye, who had been quick to assign blame. Every accusation the boss's fiancée had made was shown to be false, and the evidence was undeniable. The footage also captured the smug expressions, whispered comments, and orchestrated gestures that the fiancée and her allies used to humiliate Elena in front of others, proving that the act had been deliberate. When the boss finally viewed the footage himself, his calm, composed demeanor gave way to an unmistakable tension. He saw the maid, working diligently and patiently, being accused, mocked, and ultimately fired without cause. Each frame revealed the cruelty and arrogance of those who had tried to destroy someone innocent, and a quiet fury began to build within him. The staff who had witnessed the events, but done nothing, were now facing the undeniable proof of their complicity. The atmosphere shifted from tension to apprehension as the boss prepared to confront the household. Meanwhile, Elena, unaware that the footage existed, continued to struggle outside, not knowing that vindication was within reach. The emergence of the evidence set in motion a reckoning that would expose lies, correct injustices, and restore her dignity in ways no one could have anticipated. The atmosphere in the mansion changed the moment the boss entered the private room where the footage was being reviewed. Matteo, the Mafia boss, had always been a man of calm authority, but the truth on the screen ignited a rare and intense anger in him. He saw clearly how his fiancée had falsely accused Elena, how she orchestrated humiliation, and how the other family members had either encouraged or silently condoned the injustice. The boss's eyes narrowed as he absorbed each frame, the shaking hands of Elena, the scornful whispers of the fiancée, and the cruel laughter of those who had taken pleasure in another's suffering. Without hesitation, Matteo summoned the fiancée and the complicit staff, his voice steady but carrying the weight of command. "Explain this," he demanded, letting the footage speak for itself on the screen behind them. Isabella faltered, stammering excuses and attempting to shift blame, but Matteo's gaze cut through every lie. "Do you see what you've done?" he asked coldly, his tone leaving no room for deflection. One by one, the staff and family members were confronted with their actions, forced to acknowledge the cruelty they had inflicted on someone innocent. The fiancée's smug confidence crumbled as she realized the evidence was irrefutable, and the gravity of her deception hit her with full force. Matteo then addressed Elena's role in the household, emphasizing her loyalty, diligence, and integrity. He made it clear that her reputation and position would be restored, and that those who had wronged her would face consequences for their actions, from reprimands to restrictions and loss of privileges. In this intense confrontation, justice was served not through anger alone, but through undeniable truth, leaving the guilty with no room to hide. And signaling to everyone in the household that dishonesty and cruelty would not be tolerated under his watch. Elena, witnessing this for the first time, felt a mixture of relief, vindication, and cautious hope, realizing that her patience and resilience had not been in vain. With the confrontation behind them, the mansion slowly began to settle into a new order, one defined by accountability and restored dignity. Elena, whose innocence had been proven beyond doubt, was reinstated to her position and even received acknowledgement from the boss for her unwavering loyalty and hard work. Her return to the household was met with a mixture of awe and shame from the family members who had wronged her. The fiancée, once confident and domineering, was left to face the consequences of her false accusations, her privileges curtailed, her influence diminished, and her reputation permanently tarnished within the mansion. The other staff, too, realized the severity of their complicity, understanding that silence or complicity in the face of injustice carried weighty consequences. As Elena resumed her duties, there was a noticeable shift in the household's energy. She moved with the same quiet grace as before, but now with a renewed sense of confidence and respect. The boss ensured that her contributions were recognized and that the lessons of this incident were not forgotten. Beyond the restoration of her position, the story served as a powerful reminder to everyone in the household that trust and honesty could not be undermined, that power should not be abused, and that false accusations could unravel the very fabric of relationships built on respect. For Elena, the ordeal became more than just a vindication. It was an affirmation of her resilience, courage, and integrity. And for the family, it was a humbling lesson that no amount of status or influence could protect them from the consequences of cruelty and deceit. As this story comes to a close, we are reminded that truth and integrity have a power that cannot be silenced, no matter how loud false accusations may roar. Elena's experience shows us the devastating impact of lies and the courage it takes to endure humiliation and injustice with patience and dignity. It also highlights the responsibility of those in power to ensure fairness and accountability and the consequences faced by those who exploit their position to harm others. The Mafia boss's decisive action not only restored justice, but reinforced a vital lesson. Respect, honesty, and loyalty matter above all else, and deceit can never fully hide in the light of evidence. To everyone watching, think about how quickly judgments can ruin lives and how one act of courage, whether to defend the innocent, seek the truth, or stand firm in your own integrity, can change the course of a story forever. If you found Elena's journey moving, inspiring, or thought-provoking, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Swift Tale, and drop a comment below to share your thoughts or lessons learned from this story. Your engagement helps bring more stories of justice, resilience, and shocking truths to life, reminding us all that even in the darkest moments, truth has a way of prevailing, and those who act with integrity will ultimately be recognized and vindicated.